standing by. Coming to you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Popcorn Junkies!
Welcome to the Popcorn Junkies, hooray!
So, we're here to review Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is episode 7 in the series of films of Mission Impossible. Okay, well, this is the new Tom Cruise film. There's been hundreds of these films. I've never really got on with them particularly well. I've not liked them, but they haven't ever really particularly floated my boat or crashed my train or pulled my parachute. It's never really done it for me. I've always I've always felt and found that when James Bond is done well, nobody does it better. It's directed again by Christopher McQuarrie. It's produced, stars obviously Tom Cruise. He's the ubiquitous, is it Ethan Hunt? Is that his name?
Ethan Hint. Yes.
Ethan Hint. Ethan Hint. It's also starring, he has his two sidekicks, doesn't he? He has Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg, who are they're the two backroom boys, aren't they?
I like those two a lot.
They're the store cupboard kids.
I don't usually like Simon Pegg, but I think he's really good in this.
Oh, he's growing on me. Well, I really liked him, and then I didn't like him for a bit, and then I really like him again. In terms of the cast, it's got an incredible powerhouse female cast, which I think, hurrah for feminist, casting, because you've got Rebecca Ferguson in there. You've got Vanessa Kirby, obviously from The Crown, who's one of the villainesses in some of the other films in this series. You've got Hayley Atwell from the Marvel series, who had played Captain America's love interest.
I couldn't think where she was from, Hayley.
Yeah, and you've got Pom Klementieff.
Does she come from something?
Yeah, she plays Mantis in Marvel.
She doesn't. I thought it looked like her.
Yeah. I don't know if you are. Are you intimate with the kind of backstory? Are you coming to this?
No, not at all.
Had you done your homework?
Not really.
You always do your homework, Mum.
Well, I know, but I always think with Mission Impossible, you don't need to do your homework.
Oh, Mum!
It's one set piece after another with Tom Cruise running a lot, and that's actually what happened.
He ran a lot.
He ran a lot.
Okay, well, that's a good thing.
How old he is?
How old is he, Mum?
61.
He's not.
He's 61.
He looks good.
Right.
He looks good.
He looks good.
Okay, well, let's talk about Tom Cruise. Where are you at in the Tom Cruise? Tom Cruise has been with us for years. And Tom Cruise made a point that he wants to keep going until the same age as Harrison Ford, which means we've got another 20 years, Mum, of him running.
Whoa. Can he run anymore is my question.
Can he run and laugh at the same time anymore?
Yeah.
Can he act?
I think he can.
Yeah.
I think he really can. I was sort of in my head going through some of his back stuff, and I thought of Magnolia. Yeah. Exactly. He was so good.
Tropic Thunder. He's very good at comedy.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I think he might have comedy bones.
I suppose I don't think of him anymore, or ever have, really, as an actor. I think of him truly as a star. He's kind of like a star.
Yeah, no, I would
He sort of lands in a bit like Harrison Ford. I mean, if you were to actually microscopically unpack his acting skills, they probably wouldn't amount to much. But he's a star. He draws your attention. He holds the screen. He drives the action. And I think one of the nice things about Tom Cruise in this film, and I'm only talking about this film, but I believe this is the appeal of the Mission Impossible franchises, you really feel he's into it.
Yeah.
He's not just come along as a star, got paid his money, does what he needs to do and fucks off. He's in it, of it. He's committed to it. He wants it to be the biggest, the best, the brashest and everything else. And I think that's nice. Yeah. Let's look at some of the set pieces. This is a film about, with an enemy that is AI. And I did think, given that this must have been shot quite a while ago, things are moving so rapidly in the real world with AI.
It was shot before COVID.
Yeah, exactly. And things have moved so far since before COVID, what our fears around AI are. Though, I thought... What did you think of that as a sort of spectre, the idea of this villain being a sort of AI-esque thing?
I didn't much like it, but I was sort of gripped. What did you think of that first sequence before the titles?
Right, first sequence. I want to talk about that, the submarine sequence.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what did you think of it?
That was before we knew anything, wasn't it? And at that stage, because the film had just started, I was, in my aged brain, having to work very hard to keep up.
I thought it was an excellent opening. I thought it was a really excellent opening.
It was a brilliant beginning.
I thought it was what I liked about it. It took me back to the good old-fashioned days, although it didn't look old-fashioned. They went for some of those classic motifs in that submarine scene where, claustrophobia, the instruction, the giving of orders, the sense of a target, the confusion around radar readings, and then
they're all starting to sweat.
They're all starting to sweat, and then the idea that actually they've got a target, or there's a sort of enemy ship, and then it's on the radar, and then it disappears, and it's not there. It is there. They fire their. Do they fire their weapons? Right down to the little detail where the captain of the submarine at one point hands his cup of tea. I love that. That sort of detail. I've missed that detail in a sort of. It's like, here, take my tea. We've got a crisis developing, and it did a really good thing, because I'm not a fan of the action thriller. I'm not even really a fan of espionage, but that opening scene just made me go, yeah, I'm in for a bit of a kind of edge of my seat ride action thriller. They're all hunting for a key. It's a key. I love the way in which tokens and items in films, they always come back to something simple like a lighter, and a key.
Didn't you think there were a lot of almost twin things with Raiders of the Lost Ark, though? What were they searching for in that? In Raiders, something. The fact that they're
the Dial of Destiny, weren't they? Wasn't that the?
Yeah, you had to, two pieces had to be fit
Yes,
together.
I see what you mean. Yeah, two slotting pieces. Yeah, you're right.
Train journeys. I mean, I don't know.
You're right. I did think, because it's funny you again jumping the gun there, but with the train scene, I did think, oh, come on, fucking Hollywood, got to do something more than just another fucking train scene. But I want to hold on that. So we had the opening. We established the villain is this sort of. I never really got to grips with
who was the villain. Well, I'm not sure now.
That's exactly. Well, I'm presuming it's the guy, the actor Esai Morales, the guy from Ozark.
They said I couldn't think of.
I mean, he was clearly a villain. At times, but I couldn't work out whether this film was at times trying to purposefully make us think: is the entity, which I think is what it's called. Is it everywhere?
Have called it that.
It was a bit achingly idiotic, wasn't it? The entity. Yeah. It felt like they didn't have the courage of their convictions to go fully for what the entity could be. Because if you go very far with AI, it becomes a bit supernatural. And they talked about this idea of what you're going to do has already been decided.
Yeah.
Fate, all that kind of stuff. It's been written. So what we have is, rather than it's been written by Allah or God, it's been written by the algorithm. We know how you're going to respond to that. And I thought there was a really neat, complicated idea in there, which I think a director like Christopher Nolan would have gone deep into that.
Yeah.
And this didn't choose to. This kept it on the surface, skidding around the action.
It was absolutely surface, And if we'll come to criticism at the end, but and I was aware of that. Yeah.
And so I at times got a little bit frustrated, because I thought, oh no, there's quite a rich sort of. There's a rich time. So I don't know how I felt about the enemy being that. But then again, as you say, you sort of strap in and you get ready for the ride. Rebecca Ferguson wasn't massive in this. I'm a big Rebecca Ferguson fan.
I am. She was underused, wasn't she, a lot in this?
And I thought in her scenes she was very sort of secondary to everything else. She was sort of looking sort of pensively at him on a sort of gondola in Venice, wasn't she, at one point, which was a bit naff.
Yeah.
And I love her, so I was disappointed that we didn't get more from her. We had that brilliant sort of second scene. I was really getting Dune and kind of Close Encounters vibes and Star Wars vibes, that lovely sort of sandy shootout. Yeah. And then we have this wonderful scene back at HQ. Of the, these strange organisations called the IMF and the PQR and the STA. I like that opening scene where essentially we discover that Tom Cruise is in the room. Yeah. Did you like that?
Well,
I like the way he gave him a case with a mask in it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a bit neat bit of cinema filmmaking, because it left us thinking, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah, it's so funny, because I'd sort of forgotten that the whole of this franchise somehow came from that TV program. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Where they used to say it was self-detect.
Well, and it does at the beginning. I thought one of the weakest...
No, it does, but it took me back to those days.
The bits of... I can't work out if the bits of this that were cheesy were really badly cheesy. So, for example, that scene where Tom Cruise is in the room and then he pulls his mask off. What do you think of that?
Well, I got so sick of it, but I haven't seen it for so long. I quite liked it.
I find it almost as annoying as when films use multiverses and quantum realms, because it means you can't settle into any scene, because you just don't know whether someone's going to pull something.
Feeling everybody's faces.
Well, I thought that was quite funny as that cop was running around. I felt sorry for the cop. I forget his name. He's a good actor. The cop and his sidekick. All they did was run. I liked other little touches that I thought were really rich, and I thought, oh wow, could this be, and again, this isn't a film that's interested in sci-fi nor AI. It's interested in action. It's interested in the relationship between all the characters. I think it could have benefited a little bit from maybe digging a little bit more into what the potential consequences of all this kind of technology and kit was, especially around, I really, really liked, and I'd not thought about it. I like it when something makes you think about something in the future that could happen, which you think, oh, oh, this is important. And it was the way they were preparing for the possibility of online Armageddon, by having this analog offline area where they had millions of people frantically typing stuff into physical form from digital data. That I was thinking, that's what's going to happen one day.
Yeah, it will. I mean, I felt the whole thing was very possible. Was that the room that kept out? It was safe, that room, wasn't it?
Yeah, the room where they went in and there's all those people at all the desks and they're all typing.
Yeah.
But I just loved that as an idea. I thought, oh wow, an offline analog space. I thought we're going to, eventually in the future, we will go to that place. So elements that didn't work for me were the idea that, you've got this sort of amorphous mass of malevolence. I needed to focus it a little bit more. I'll tell you one thing I did like. I thought Hayley Atwell and his chemistry was fantastic.
Yeah, I thought that was good too.
Did you?
Yeah.
I was getting Cary Grant vibes.
Yeah, they were really natural together, weren't they?
She was great.
One of my favourite scenes was the Fiat where they were handcuffed and where they had to. I thought that was really well done.
It was excellent, and I'm pleased you said that because that for me was so well done. It was, for me it was kind of riffing on all that sort of the Italian Job.
The Italian Job.
Yeah,
exactly,
the films with the Beatles when they're running around, and I also thought you really did have that sort of Cary Grant, what's the name, Grace Kelly type sort of thing going on in the car because, they had to be intimate, and I thought the actual car chase was really inventive, and I thought in exactly the way that the Indiana Jones tut-tut scene wasn't.
Didn't, I know. I mean, I felt in many ways. I mean, I thought there were parallels with the Indiana Jones film, and unfortunately Indiana Jones came out poorly compared to it. Not for characterization and in depth, but just something, I don't know, something was missing in Indiana Jones.
I think the chemistry test between Hayley Atwell and Tom Cruise was excellent. I thought it was brilliant. I could have done with a bit more Simon Pegg. I thought he was always very funny.
Yeah, he was actually. I thought Ving Rhames was it? Yeah, I thought we got quite a lot of him, didn't we?
Yeah, he's always just there. I find poor old Ving is kind of there to fill in the sort of narrative holes that you need filling.
He is, but he was better in this today.
Yeah, but he's kind of there to say, we now have a bomb. If we don't get this key to someone, the world's going to blow up. And it just gives us all in the audience a moment to go, oh yeah, that's our mission.
Yeah, that's what's happening in this film.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I even forgave it. I have to confess, just jumping back to the Mission Impossible tape, this message will self-implode and explode. I thought they could have done a bit better than a clearly a smoke machine and a dustbin.
I know they use that a couple of times.
I mean, have they? I would have made. I mean, in this day and age, I'd have had it sort of, I don't know, kind of digitally decompose or something like that.
Yeah. My main problem with it was there was something curiously old-fashioned about it, I thought.
Yes.
And don't ask me why, because amazing things were going on in front of me. But also, Tom Cruise is brilliant. He's a star. I agree with everything that we said in the beginning.
Yeah.
But the whole film was predicated on moving from one extraordinary thing that he did to the next extraordinary thing that he did. And most of those were running. And I thought, in a minute, he's just going to run through the screen and run and run and run.
Yeah,
whether it had anything to do with anything or not. And I mean, obviously, they worked towards the motorbike going over the cliff and all of that.
I tell you what the film, I think, in the end, suffered from. And I think the things you're talking about were laid bare much more by the fact that it was too long. It was a good half an hour too long. And there was actually a lot of kind of stuff, even in between the set pieces. They didn't even necessarily need to lose a set piece. It just could have all been really tightened. And I think if they tightened it, we'd have had less of a sense of. I mean, the danger with it, I think, sometimes is that you have a bit of plot explication. Then you go back into the story, and then once it's got a little bit more complicated, you come out for air, and then Ving Rhames or someone else reminds us what the mission is, what we need, and we dive back in. I think for me, the problems in this film emerged from too many Vanessa Kirbys, too many masks being pulled off, some key moments and key confrontations. I thought it was a great build to him having to make a choice between the two female leads. And there being a choice, and this being then tied into an algorithmic prediction of the future, and then that being tied into us thinking as a viewer, oh, can Tom Cruise change the course of time? And then them all saying, but no, you have to actually step in tune with the algorithm, otherwise something go wrong. I mean, I thought all of that was really interesting. I think actually it's a film that needed to, and I think it's, it is an action film. It's a tentpole. It's appealing to everyone. But I think it's a film that could have benefited just that much more if it had decided to go into the sort of logic of the tech and the villainy and the dilemma that they were in a bit more. It kind of is a little bit like the Indiana Jones film. I think they needed to have the courage of their convictions and actually sort of build the truth of what the problem was a bit more. And I think that would have given it another layer, because that moment where he was given the choice between the two, and then we had a fight between the guy from Ozark and her on the bridge of sighs or whatever in Venice, and it was just a hand knife. It was just very. It was very old-fashioned. Shots of like a knife on the floor, and then being stabbed. I thought, well, this is weird. After all this high-tech wizardry and everything else, we're actually dealing with a knife being a dagger.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. I don't actually think I agree with that, because if they'd given me any more explanation, I would have lost interest.
No, not explanation. I think depth to what the problem was.
Depth, yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
I could have done. I felt they were they'd opened up quite an interesting, quite layered, thoughtful kind of this film, but it fell foul because actually it wasn't developed or built enough for me.
I see what you mean. Story. Yeah.
What did you think of the train scene?
It was fantastic. I mean, I just started to think this is too long.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it gave us everything that Titanic gave us with a ship going down, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I thought it was absolutely sensational.
I did, and it took away that idea that, like even just now when you said it was half an hour too long, I agree with that in one way, but because that last half hour was the train, I just thought it was astonishing.
It was a brilliant sleight of hand, because you're right.
Yeah.
I was really feeling the weight of it, and I was actually getting really annoyed that Hollywood wasn't coming up with anything more than... the question I always ask in these action scenes is, why have they gone onto the roof of a fucking train to stand up and fight? Of course you're vulnerable. But I thought at the point that the end of the train scene happens and all hell breaks loose, in the way that they did it, it was so brilliantly done.
It was absolutely brilliant. I mean...
And they clearly used some kind of, they obviously, what I love about it as well from a filmmaking perspective, they must have, they obviously built the set and hung it upside down, and they've hung him within that set. Obviously the CGI of the river beneath them and everything, but there was a lot of physical reality to that. And I think that, for me, was another reminder of this stuff is really, really good when there's a good balance of physical reality. So like that moment with the piano, that was really well thought out.
Yeah.
Because he was behind the geography was sensible, the orientation was sensible. They built that brilliant Hitchcockian thing. You saw one carriage go. You're thinking that means it will stymie the flow of carriages. No, it's cumulative.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I was so stressed.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I was stunned and amazed by that scene. I left the cinema feeling wholly that scene and thinking how brilliant it was. The other thing I threw out, you could really tell the difference somehow in this film between films that use a lot of CGI and films that don't. And the difference was huge.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, they do use a lot, but it's for me it's not just being overly reliant on it. It's like, I liked those. It's good old French, so the thing that you're saying was a problem with it, which was a bit old fashioned, which I kind of agree, ended up being the thing that I think made that final scene so successful. It was excellently thought through. By the end, I kind of didn't give a damn about the whole Vanessa Kirby sort of...
No, I thought the Vanessa Kirby situation, actually, the double thing, was overdone and overlong. And she got on my nerves, to be honest. She did me too. Sitting there like this.
Yeah, and sort of simpering, and who wouldn't have clicked accept? You're right, that final scene with the train kind of excused the length and made me come out of the cinema forgiving it. Like, okay, well, give us your summary and give us your score, Mum.
It was a film of a small man running very fast into the distance. Yeah, I mean, there's something about Tom Cruise. I can't help but like him.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because he's probably absolutely horrible in real life.
I don't think he is. I think people want him to be. I don't necessarily think he is.
No, but he's so sort of suave in an old-fashioned sort of way. I mean, you were saying like the whole Cary Grant thing in a way. He's sort of, he wanted all.
But this is much more your kind of genre than mine. So how did it really sort of tickle the boxes that you like of it? You like thrillers, you like action, you like espionage, you like all that. So did it? Fire on all those?
No. It did. It did tickle those boxes. But at the same time, there was an overriding sort of feeling in me of it being slightly old-fashioned. And I don't know how or where that came from. The set pieces, I loved the Fiat. The train was masterly.
Okay, so give us your score.
For the sort of film it is,
yes,
which is pure entertainment, pure excitement, 78.
Right. And how would you judge it not for what it is?
Well, if it tried to be not just entertainment, if
Right.
it tried to have sort of...
Do you think it's got the Top Gun? Was it as successful? Will it be as successful as Top Gun, do you think? It doesn't have the nostalgia aspect. Well, I suppose it does. It's the whole Mission Impossible thing.
No, I don't think it will.
No.
Do you think it will?
I don't know.
I came out thinking, I really like you, Tom. I really like you, but I don't think it will be as successful. Because there was sort of more of him in Top Gun.
Right. My summary on this is, I thought it was too long. I think you're absolutely right. It is old-fashioned. I think they hit upon an excellently sort of complex, layered, and potentially really sort of thought-provoking villain in this.
Yeah.
And then essentially the whole film just characterised that villain in a very simplistic two-dimensional fashion, which kind of, in a sense, diminished it. A similar kind of plot storytelling device or failure for me has happened in the Indiana Jones. I can't stress enough, it's a very odd thing that I'm trying to explain about the two plots, where it feels like in the execution there was almost a little bit, they were a little bit shamefaced or ashamed of what they were actually dealing with and didn't believe in it. You've got to go for it. And I feel both this film and Indiana Jones didn't go for what their sort of main story arc was, because if they'd gone for it, they could have got into it more complicatedly. So that said, it ended up being a long film of explication set piece, you know, whether it be the airport scene, whether it be the submarine scene, the Fiat 500, the train scene, you know, whatever, the desert scene, you know, you can almost remember the film based upon seeing those scenes, you know, the Venice scenes, you know, the whole sort of
Venice scenes,
the masquerade, the mask ball, and all that kind of stuff. Vanessa Kirby was her character didn't really get me going, and I was disappointed to see Rebecca Ferguson not in it as much. But that was all offset by the fact that I really enjoyed Hayley Atwell, and I really enjoyed her with Tom Cruise. In a weird way, I do think the nostalgia from this film comes from its old-fashioned execution, in a sense.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
But the thing that you're describing, which I find almost completely sort of bizarre, is the very thing you're saying it is the thing that traditionally makes me always step away from this as a genre. I find the action thriller inherently dated and old-fashioned and sort of, you know, guns and knives. It's kind of like, there's limits to guns and knives and running after someone. I just can only do so much of it. You know, the Fast and the Furious, Fast X did it just so badly. So yes, what would I give it? I enjoyed it. What I would say is I enjoyed it much more than I thought I was going to. I thought it was diverting and it was entertaining. I will probably give it 70.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go. Well done, Tom. I hope it does do well, because we just want everything that can do well to do well. And of course, next we've got Barbageddon, or Barbenheimer, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Oppenheimer.
It'll take another 2 years for them to make the sequel, won't it?
I think they must have shot it already, surely.
Oh, do you?
They
I
must
never
have
thought
done.
of that.
I think they shot it back to back, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, guys, tell us your thoughts. Drop them below. I know a huge number of you are Tom Cruise fans. I know that you've often taken me to task for, you know, taking the piss out of him too much. But I actually really enjoyed being with him. And I thought we had a real sense of his comic bone future in that Fiat 500 scene.
He could do all sorts of things in comedy. I actually wanted more, funnily enough. I mean, we had so much of his running. I know he can run better than anybody else, but I wanted more of him just talking, sitting, acting.
A bit more. I wanted a few more laughs. I think some of them provided a few, but I think they could have chucked in a few more. For nearly 3 hours in the cinema, you want a few more light and shade moments.
It was very laughless, I thought.
It was
laughless. There were only the odd, and that's why they could have done with Simon Pegg a bit more, or somebody.
I agree. Well, there you go, guys. Share your thoughts below. Tell us what you think.